Hi there, everybody. It's Marin Bates with Grant's Magic U and another edition of 3D Thursday. A few minutes every week where we take the time to stretch our brains, give our minds a little bit of exercise, and practice thinking outside of what we already know and outside of what we already think we know in our grants work, in our nonprofit work in the community, and in our lives at large. And this is how excited I am to be here with you today. And no, I have not upgraded my technology yet. I'm still working on that. But hey, if you think this is pretty funky for starting out, sometime go do a little bit of research and see what they did to make that first Star Wars movie. I think you'd be astonished at how much duct tape they used. All right, so let's continue on with where we left off last week, where we were talking about now you see it, or do you? And you may remember the story about Captain Cook's sailing ship and the native inhabitants of the South Sea Islands that could not see this ship as it was moving toward them across the ocean. Why? Because there was nothing in their brain neurology, nothing in the structure of their brain over all their many, many generations of living on those islands that pre-wired them to see anything like this. And we unpacked that a little bit and moved a little bit farther. So I want to take that a step beyond where we left off last week. And yes, I give you a homework assignment, and yes, we'll get to that. And today I want to focus on something I call the case of the cynical grant reviewer, or box. What box? I don't see no stinking box. So that's my friend Grumpy. He's one of the 7 dwarves, but for our purposes today, he's my cynical grant reviewer. All right, now I'm going to stick him up here on the wall behind me because we're going to be coming back to him in just a bit. But I actually want to tell you the story of the cynical grant reviewer. Now, I was on one of our blogs, one of our forums for grant writers. Oh gosh, it's probably been about 6 months ago now. And this was actually the inspiration behind 3D Thursday. So I was reading the responses to a particular question that somebody had posted, and somebody came on with a response about the review process that had just knocked my socks off. Now, I've been working in this field for a long, long time, as most of you know, and I got my start working with federal grants. I have tons of experience with federal grants, and I cracked the code of what goes into a winning grant proposal while I was working with federal grants. I learned what happens in the review process while I was working with federal grants. But this was a post from somebody who shall remain nameless. He will probably never ever see this video. But he said that he has in his career written over 150 funded grant proposals, and he has sat on innumerable federal grant review committees. And this is what he said he learned. He learned that the grant review process in the federal world is a crapshoot. And how does he know this? He knows this because on the review panels that he has served, on many occasions, they will recommend by point value, which are the top point scoring proposals, 98, 97, 96, 95, 93, whatever it is, all the way down to the bottom. They will select and recommend the top proposals on point scores. This is the review panel. They'll submit that recommendation over to the department that's issuing the funding. And he said what comes back in no way, shape, or form reflects the recommendations that the review panel submitted. He said, in fact, oftentimes there are proposals that are funded that weren't even in our top list of 10 or 15, whatever the case may be. So not only were they not funding from the top down, but they were actually pulling proposals up from below what the review panel understood was the cutoff line. So he said it's a crapshoot. It must be political. It must be that they really don't care about the quality of the proposals. It must be somebody's pulling strings behind the scenes because nothing else makes sense. So he got very cynical. He said, I'm probably pretty cynical about this, but based on my experience, I'm justified. Well, it just blew my hair back, because what I realized was, if you remember, here's our little fellow here, box. I don't see no stinking box. I'm going to take him down right now. He'll probably do better if I can do this with him for right now. This is my cynical grant reviewer over here. And he's inside a box and he doesn't even know it. Now, what do I mean by that? He is looking at his box and trying to make sense of something that's happening on the other side of it. And he can't see what's out there. He can only see what shows up in here. And to him, the process makes no sense at all. He sends the review recommendations out, and what comes back in the form of funded proposals makes no sense. Okay, so this is what got me going, thinking about what would he have to believe to not understand that there's something else going on out there that's invisible to him, but it doesn't have to be invisible to him. What is going on in his career that he's gotten 150 grant proposals funded by the federal government and then sat on numerous review panels, and he still doesn't understand what the decision-making process is all about, how it works, and how those decisions are made. I was absolutely shocked by that. And I'm going to be sharing with you what I know about the decisions. I want to make sure that I open that box up for us so we can see beyond it ourselves. But that's going to be coming a little bit later. See, I want to talk a little bit more about the box. All right? So what does this look like to you? That's right, it's the night sky. And if I put it up really close, you can see all those beautiful stars, okay? Gorgeous Milky Way. Well, back in the day, not that long ago, people standing outside looking at that night sky believed that they were looking at the edge of a box, all right? In their worldview, based on what they knew, based on what they could discern, based on what they could figure out, when they looked at the night sky, they were seeing, or when they looked at the sky as a whole, they were seeing the inside of a bowl. All right, the whole sky was like a bowl that enclosed all of the flat earth as far as they could see. And the sun moved across the bowl, and the moon moved across the bowl, and clouds moved back and forth between the bowl and the earth. And those stars somehow were shiny things that were stuck to the bowl, or maybe a lot of people would believe they were pinpricks or holes in the top of the bowl. And it was the celestial lights of the heavens that was shining through in the form of stars. Okay, so we can laugh about that now, but they literally didn't know any better. They literally were doing their best to make sense of what they could see based on their frame of reference. Now we know there's no bowl there. We know that those stars are not tiny pinpricks, but huge, enormous, gigantic light and gas and incredible things. We know that now because we have the technology to step outside the box and see what is on the other side. All right, so that's just a quick little example of how easy it is, and we can look back at our in our not that distant past and see how easy it is not to really have any understanding that there's anything else that exists. And we do our very best to make sense of what we can see based on what we already know, until something happens to push that box out, until something happens to knock the walls down, and suddenly we can see what was there all along, outside our box, and we just didn't know it. Okay, so here's a little challenge for you. You remember last week I showed you something that looked a little bit like this. It was a rectangle and it had 4 circles in the inside of it. And I challenged you to think about as many different things as you could that this could be. Now I'm going to take that challenge one step farther. I'm not actually going to address it specifically today, but I'm going to ask you this. Imagine that this is our friend who has always lived inside a box. He doesn't have to be a grant reviewer. He could be anybody, because guys, we all live inside boxes. We all live inside our own beliefs. We all live inside our constructs based on our experience and based on what we figured out. We all do. So here's this fella inside his box. Now let's just imagine that this is a real box, all right? And that one day he looks up at the top of his box, and instead of seeing that solid brown that he's always seen, he sees something that looks like this. He's never seen that before. Remember, he doesn't know he's in a box. He thinks he's seeing everything there is. So what would this be to him based on where he is in his box? Now let's flip this around and think about those people who were looking at the night sky, thinking that they were seeing as far as it was possible to see because there was a top up there somehow. And our fellow in the box is doing exactly the same thing. He's looking up at everything he believes there is. He believes there's a top and there's nothing beyond that. And suddenly one day, this is what he sees. So just as the people who were looking at the night sky didn't know the galaxies and the universes that stretched beyond, the fellow in the box doesn't know that there's anything beyond the top of his box. All right, so forget the grant seeker for right now, the grant reviewer for right now, and let's just go back to that challenge. What could actually be happening that would create this that he sees from inside the box? Right? So that's my question for you, and I think we're going to pretty much leave it at that today, because what we don't know and what we don't even know we don't know, but what we struggle to make sense of anyway, can be so confusing to us in our grants work, in our nonprofit work, and in our lives as a whole. We're trying to make sense of something, and the way we make sense of something that we don't understand often confuses us or sends us down a wrong path. Or in the case of my grumpy fellow, where is my grumpy fellow now? Oh, poor guy. In the case of this guy, he actually became cynical. He actually made judgments up about the people who were making the grant decisions, because the only way he could figure out why, when his review panel did this, this is what came back to them, doesn't make sense, doesn't look like what we sent them, what's going on there, was to decide that it was a crapshoot. All right, that it just didn't make sense at all. That was basically his decision. That is not true. And in the next couple of sessions, I want to be sharing with you what is happening there behind the curtains, if you will, or outside the box, that can look like it doesn't make sense, that can look like it's a crapshoot, that can look like it must be political, that can look like people just pull strings and things happen, and they don't really pay attention to the quality of the proposals. They don't really pay attention to the points that the reviewers so lovingly, carefully awarded to each proposal. That isn't what happens, and I want to share with you what really does happen, but I want to do it in the bigger context of thinking literally what could be happening outside the box that's invisible to me that would produce what I'm actually seeing here. Okay, so homework assignment, think about that a little bit more from the perspective of our cynical grant reviewer, and we'll come back next week for 3D Thursday and take a little bit closer look at what he is seeing, what he could be seeing, what could be going on out there. He doesn't even know there is an out there, but what could be happening that looks like this to him. All right, lots of fun with this, and I hope you have a good time. We have lots of interesting conversations ahead on this topic. Okay, so this is Marin Bass wishing you a wonderful week. We'll see you again next Thursday for 3D Thursday. Until then, wishing you abundant, delightful, and awesome experiences in everything you do until we meet again. Thanks. Bye for now.